When I was a kid, my family moved around a lot. We never stayed in the same place for long, though. It always seemed as if we were trying to find another house to move to again. Well, because of this, many of my earliest memories are fuzzy and clear, and I can never seem to make them out. However, there's this one period of time that remains in my mind as clear as day, as if the whole damn thing happened yesterday. I often wonder whether these memories were simply hallucinations caused by that terrible sickness I had that summer. God, but in my heart, I knew that these memories were very, very real. I remembered that we were living in a large house on the outskirts of the city. As a family of 3, we didn't really need such a big home, and there were a large number of rooms that we never really used during the 5 months we actually spent there. In a lot of ways, I think this was just a big waste of space, but it was the only house we could find that was even close to my dad's place of work. The day after my 5th birthday, I came down with a horrible fever. It was so bad that the doctor said I had to rest in bed for at least 3 weeks before I could even concentrate on anything else besides getting well. And oh geez, that was a horrible time. And plus it was just a horrible time to be bedridden anyway, as we were getting ready to move and most of my toys were already being packed away in boxes, so I couldn't play with those either even. My bedroom was almost empty and I had very little to keep to myself. And I had no sources of entertainment at all. I mean, if you want to be brutally honest, I guess there were some bonuses to being sick. My mother brought me some ginger ale and a few books several times a day. But other than that, there was precious little for me to do. I would always get bored, and I would grow miserable and more miserable by the day. I don't exactly recall how I met Mr. Widemouth. I think it was about a week after I was diagnosed with a fever and permanently confined to my bed. My first memory of him is when I asked him if he had a name. He told me to call him Mr. Widemouth because his mouth was large, which, in fact, everything about him was large in comparison to his body, his head, his eyes, his crooked ears. But I have to agree that his mouth was by far the largest. You know, you kind of look like a Furby, I said one night as he flipped through one of my books. Mr. Widemouth stopped and gave me a puzzled look.
A Furby? What on earth is a Furby?
He asked. I shrugged. You know, the toys, the little furry robots, big ears. You can pet them, feed them, they're almost kind of like real pets.
Oh,
replied Mr. Widemouth.
well, you won't be needing one of those. They aren't the same as having a real friend.
I also remember that one of the weirdest things that bugged me about Mr. Widemouth was that he always seemed to hide whenever Mom would come around.
Don't worry, I hide under your bed,
he later explained.
I don't want your parents to see me because I am afraid that they won't let us play together anymore.
We didn't do much during those first few days. Mr. Widemouth just looked at my books, fascinated by all the stories and pictures that they had. The 3rd or 4th morning after I met him, he greeted me with a large smile on his face.
Hey! I have a new game that we can play!
He said.
We have to wait until your mother comes to check on you, because she can't see us play it. It's a secret game.
My mother came in with a few more books and the same soda at about the usual time that she did every day. And after she left, Mr. Widemouth slipped out from under my bed and tugged me by the hand.
We have to go to the room at the end of the hallway.
I objected at first because my parents had forbidden me to leave my bed without their permission. But Mr. Widemouth persisted until I finally decided to just go along. The room at the end of the hall had no furniture or wallpaper. Its only distinguishing feature was a window opposite from the doorway. Mr. Widemouth darted across the room and gave the window a firm push, flinging it open. Then he beckoned me and told me to look out to the ground below. We were on the second floor of the house, but it was on a hill, and from this angle, the drop was more steep than the other 2 floors due to the incline.
I like to play pretend up here. I pretend that there's a big, soft trampoline below this window, and then I jump. If you pretend hard enough, you'll bounce back up like a feather. I want you to try.
Now, before I tell you this, I was only about 5 years old and I had a high fever, so I wasn't thinking very clearly when I looked down, so I actually considered the possibility of doing this. Well, that seems like a pretty long jump, Mr. Widemouth. Are you sure that this is safe?
But that's all a part of the fun. It wouldn't be fun if it was only a short drop. Come on. If it were that way, you might as well just be bouncing on a real trampoline.
I toyed with the idea, picturing myself falling through thin air, only to bounce right back up to the window on some unseen force to the human eyes. But however, the realist in me prevailed. Well, maybe some other time, Mr. Widemouth. I don't know if I have enough imagination. I could really get hurt. Mr. Widemouth's face contorted into a snarl. But only for a moment. Anger gave way to simple disappointment.
If you say so, little one.
He spent the rest of the day under my bed, quiet as a mouse. The following morning, Mr. Widemouth arrived holding a small box.
I want to teach you how to juggle. Here are some things you can use to practice before I start giving you lessons.
I looked curiously inside the box. It was full of knives. My parents! My parents are gonna kill me! I shouted, horrified that Mr. Widemouth had brought knives into my room. My parents would never allow me to touch them. I'll be spanked! I'll be grounded for a year! What are you doing? Mr. Widemouth frowned.
It's fun to juggle these! I just want you to try it!
I pushed the box away. I can't! I'll get in trouble! Knives just aren't safe to throw around in the air like that. Mr. Widemouth's frown turned into a deep scowl. He took the box of knives and then slid them under my bed, along with himself. He remained there for the rest of the day. I began to wonder how often he was under there. I started having trouble sleeping after that. Mr. Widemouth would often wake me up at night, say he put a real trampoline under the window, a big invisible one. He said that I couldn't see it in the dark. I always declined and tried to go back to sleep, but Mr. Widemouth persisted, always. Sometimes he stayed by my side until early in the morning, encouraging me to jump. He wasn't so fun to play with anymore. My mom came to me one morning and told me I was well enough to go outside and walk around for a while. She thought the fresh air would do me some good, especially after being confined to my room for so long. Ecstatic, I put on my sneakers and trotted out to the back porch, yearning to feel the great sun on my face once again. And Mr. Widemouth was outside, waiting for me.
I have something that I want you to see.
I must have given him a weird look or something, because he also added,
Oh, it's safe. I promise.
I followed him, and he led me to a trail that ran through the woods right behind my house.
This is an important path. I have had a lot of friends your age. And when they were ready, I took them down this path to a very, very special place. You aren't ready yet, but one day, I hope I can take you there.
I returned to the house, wondering what kind of place lay at the end of that trail. 2 weeks after I met Mr. Widemouth, we packed the last of our belongings into a moving truck, and we were about to set off on a long drive to our new home. I considered telling Mr. Widemouth that I would be leaving. But even at 5 years old, I was beginning to suspect that perhaps his intentions were not for my benefit. despite what he claimed. For this reason, I decided to keep my departure a secret. It was 4 a.m. by the time we were ready to leave. My mother helped me into the truck, and my father was sitting behind the wheel. I placed my head against the window, hoping to get some sleep before the sun came up. As we backed out of the driveway, I looked up and saw Mr. Widemouth's silhouette in my bedroom window. He stood there, motionless, until the truck was about to turn into the main road. He gave a pitiful little wave goodbye, holding a steak knife in his other hand. I didn't wave back to him. Years later, I was passing through the area and decided to return and pay a visit to that house. I found that the piece of land of our house was completely empty except for the foundation. Turns out the house had burnt down a few years after we left. Out of curiosity, I followed the trail that Mr. Widemouth had shown me. Part of me expected him to jump out from behind a tree and scare the living daylights out of me. But I felt that Mr. Widemouth was gone now, somehow tied to the house that no longer even existed. I kept walking, and the trail ended at a cemetery. I noticed that many of these tombstones were for children.